So started out project here by ripping the truck box off it, and the box sides were all just rotten, so we ripped them off too, drilled out all the plug welds and tore them off, put new sides on. I found it in auction, just happened to be in the right place at the right time for that, and a fair bit of work to get them to fit right. They were Ford quality box sides, but you know how that works. Took a lot of welding and patching the wheel wells. They were rotted out pretty good on the inside of the box here, and figured sandblast everything else that wasn't going to get painted, so we prepped her for paint and went through and got her ready to go here. So once I had the box sides on there, we shot her with primer and hung everything up and painted it. And it's a two-tone paint job on there, so we figured paint her all up with the silver first. Outside, I don't paint in the shop anymore after a lot of cleanup one day. It's no fun to do either. And I stumbled on these racks to hang everything on at an auction. I think I paid about $45, $50 for them, and they've been handier than crap for holding all the panels and parts and pieces where I need them, and easy to work with. And then I'd bring them back inside the shop here and let them cure, cook them with the tube heater. So after I let it cure overnight, we went and masked out for the two-tone part. Did the fenders, tailgate, box sides. That's all I've got tore off here at the time. I've been sort of working on it piece by piece, and shot them outside likewise, and brought them back in to cure again with the tube heater. A lot of this truck was painted right close to freezing temperatures, and I ended up using a catalyst with the Endura paint to keep it from being a problem. It cured up real quick, and once I brought it inside to cook, it was fantastic. Once the paint was cured there, I masked it off and shot the box liner in it. I've been very happy with the results with the Raptor liner with the shoots gun. I tried a different product on this box here, and I was not overly impressed. It's still not bad. I didn't like the texture as much, and seemed like the Raptor liner made more product out of it than this, I believe it was Shake and Shoots. So I'd definitely, given the choice, go back with the Raptor liner with the shoots gun. It just seems to turn all the projects out a little better. So I masked off the box and shot it up with the Raptor, or the Shake and Shoots. Let it cure up real good, did the tailgate, did the box. Should turn into a decent quality finish on it. The one thing I do want to mention here is that when you do take the masking off for the box liner, I'm not overly rich, so I don't buy the tape with the wire in it. I just use regular masking tape or painter's tape, and you really got to watch that you pull it off at the right time. You want to pull it off where it's hard enough it's not going to be all stringy and goopy all over the place, so you get a nice crisp line. But you do want to pull it off before it gets all hard and leaves the masking tape in there and doesn't give you a clean line. So with the box painted up and ready to go, I jump around on this project a little bit here and there depending what I have for parts and stuff. I started hacking the rad support apart for doing the intercooler. These trucks never had an intercooler, and I kind of prefer to put one in off of 6 liter in this case. I'd clearance it to make room for the pipes, and we went through and cleaned the cab up and patched some other pieces of the floorboards in it and got the doors sanded down and did some minor body work around them. When I do all this stuff, I try to tear it down the best I can, down to pretty much nothing. Makes it easier to get a nice paint job when the door handles and hinges and mirrors and glass and everything else is. If it's just a beater truck, I kind of go through and do it a little differently with taking the masking tape and taping the weather seals and stuff off and just splash her with paint at that point. The one thing I do want to mention here, while I got the box off the truck, I went and put a 38-gallon fuel tank in the back instead of the 19-gallon that was there. I also went through and changed the shackles and mounts for the rear springs. They were all rusty and pretty bad shape there. So what I usually do, if I can, I use the hoe and lift the cab and box and parts and pieces around. Makes it easy when you can move it all directions instead of just one. And the other thing I really like doing, I do it with all my trucks, I put a BW flip over in it, and then I can put a flip over ball or fifth wheel or whatever I need in it. Makes it nice and handy. So I did the same thing here with the doors in the cab and the rad support. Got them all primed up and hung on the racks, and took them outside, painted them first coat, brought them in, cured them, took them back outside, masked them off, and painted the next coat, and brought them in, cured them. These were definitely done below freezing, this set here. Leaves are off the trees and the whole 9 yards there. And brought everything back in to start to assemble what I could inside. Put pieces back together, the heat shield, AC box, all the stuff I could assemble while I was waiting. And get everything prepped for switching the cab out. Figured that was the way to do it, and definitely warmer inside. Work on it that way, and once that was done, work on the motor. I'm not sure if you know what you're looking at here, but it's the oil filter housing there. I pulled the oil cooler apart on the truck and re-O-ringed it, and while we had everything off, noticed where the little screw is there. That piece was missing, and that is the pressure relief for the oil filter. I figured that was probably a good thing to have in there, and couldn't find any parts without buying a whole new housing for it. So I ended up trying to make our own. Say stainless steel bolt nut, and put it back on the spring that I did find that was there, and used a small pipe thread plug and drilled it out for the bypass. And as you can see, it seems like it seats pretty good, and it's definitely been working. I've put a bunch of miles on that truck since. The other thing I ended up having to do is go through with the oil pan, and the gasket was leaking on the dipstick, and they usually leak and then people suck them down and it's just a pot metal, and it strips the threads out on them and you're left with a hunk of garbage. So I ended up having to pull the pan, fix that, put a reusable pan gasket on it, and tried to fix as many oil leaks as I found with it. While I had the pan off, I looked inside and everything looked okay on the cylinder walls and piston skirts, so put her all back together. So I actually did a bunch of work to this engine while I had it out. I had the oil galleries, changed all the O-rings, anything I could get another piece for from the local O-ring shop here, and they crossed what they could, and I made a decent kit for next to nothing compared to Ford's price. So I went through, re-O-ringed everything, changed the alternator out, got a different bracket that holds the alternator on to enable use with a double pulleyed tensioner. I guess it keeps that belt from flopping around a whole lot better on there. The other thing I did is I went and put a water pump off of 7.3 International, more of an industrial application, like you'd find these water pumps on school buses and medium duty trucks, I guess. And it comes with a coolant filter port, so I had to rechange some of the coolant hoses and reroute them, and been pretty happy so far with that. And these pumps are rebuildable too. They run a ceramic seal that a guy can buy on eBay and rebuild them, so that's kind of handy. So while I was waiting for some parts and pieces to come in, I decided to work on my gauge consoles and paint them up so they'd match the interior color. This 3 gauge pod with the switches, that's meant for, I believe, an F750. And the seats I put in there were out of a newer model Super Duty. I think they're out of an 06 or an 05 anyway. I just like them, they feel a lot better in there. I had to modify some welds on the front seats there to make it all fit the floor pan configuration, and measured out for the overhead pod, and get the other stuff going for the pillar pod, and then run the foil. I use foam with the foil on it for sound deadening underneath. That tar that they put on there was all broken up and fallen off, and just deadens the sound, gives a little more insulation, and it works out pretty good that way. So we went through and put that on, pre-drilled the holes for the seats, put the carpet or vinyl flooring in there. I like the vinyl a lot more than the carpet, keeps the water from soaking in, wicking in. Put the gauges in the pod and pillar and try to make everything fit the way it should, and pop the rear window in and just keep piecing it together until I can get it on the truck. The one thing I do want to note, this cab is not the cab that was on this truck. It was a donor cab I bought, had power windows, power doors in it, and it was much better shape overall than the cab that was on it. I'm going to use the other cab for another project coming up where I'm going to be cutting, hacking, and welding it, and we'll see what we come up with. So while I had it out and the cab off, I went through and pulled the motor and cleaned up a few things on the frame, got rid of the mounts, put polyurethane bushings in everywhere I could. The exhaust system showed up. It's a diamond eye 4-inch stainless, and it seems like it moves some pretty good exhaust. Been happy with it, and started piecing the cab back together even more. Put it on the box and wheeled it in the shop and slung the motor on it. You can see with the fan belt, I got the tranny cooler I was making sitting on top there for the ZF 5-speed. You can see it slowly coming back together here. Got the exhaust put on it and had to do a whole bunch of welding on that. It was supposed to be a fit kit, but for some reason it didn't fit, and then with the fuel tank sticking down, it was a bunch more hacking and slashing and gluing. Put it back together and everything clears pretty good now. So some more goodies showed up. I've got my turbo spider on top there, and I got the electric fuel system rigged up there. I went from manual pump on the cam lobe to running a 6-liter pump so I can keep everything forward, and then I got a fuel pressure regulator on there, and it seems pretty happy with that electric fuel system on it now. A little bit of playing around, some dialing in and change a few lines, but nothing major, and I'm doing that on all my 7.3 Powerstroke projects right now. It seems to be working quite well. Put a bunch more stuff in the inside again, and been storing parts in there, as you can tell from the pictures here. Playing around with an oversized oil filter and getting the wires up into the headliner for that pod. Ended up sneaking a lot of wires through the A-arms, or A-pillar. Make the gauges in there. Had to bring them up the passenger side to drop them back. I ended up putting a PHP chip in there, along with some baby swamps in the 7.3, as well as snow kit. We'll go into some stuff further on with that, on what I think of some of their things that showed up. I got the dash in, got the water meth tank. It's a 10-gallon tank. Pretty nice little setup. And got the intercooler and rad support going. Started putting it back in and piecing parts and pieces together. I ended up going with the hydro boost on the truck instead of the vacuum, or power steering fluid, and it seems to be working a lot better for the brakes, but I am having issues with the old vacuum pump. I ended up having to use it as an idler pulley, and that'll go into some detail in a further video. I got the doors on the cab, got the hood sitting in the box there. As I started piecing together, having a small shop is kind of a pain because it's a small shop. Started putting lights on, anything I can do in the time while I'm waiting for more parts to show up. Mirrors, etc., etc. The intercooler in there, got the front cowl put together, got the hood put on it, and started piecing more pieces in the engine. You can see the vacuum pump there. He has the idler. I ended up going through and pulling the vacuum part of it off where the cam lobe is in there, packed it with grease, and popped a frost plug in there to use it as a idler pulley for the time being. And it's got some issues. It made it 15,000 miles and got some problems with it we'll be addressing later on. Got some aftermarket headlights in there and wired them in. They have their own daytime running light circuit. It's kind of one of those things where I wired it in with the key on switch for the accessories and pulled the daytime running light module out. And when you pull that module out, I didn't know at the time, it drops out your brake light symbol on the dash for your e-brake, as well as your high beam indicator. So just food for thought there. There's a couple wires to solder together and everything will work perfect. I guess in the States they have a daytime running light dummy plug where we had that module. So now we're getting to the snow kit, the water meth, and as much as I like the kit, I had some parts show up that I didn't think were quite right. Somebody drilled the holes at the factory there and sputted a drill bit into the silicone tube, not all the way through, but enough that it was not up to my specs. As far as I'm concerned, I emailed them and had the kit sitting around for a while, so it was off warranty. I thought maybe they'd send out a new boot and I'd re-drill the holes and put it in myself there or something, and that was a no-go. They said buy another one when it blows. So just word of wisdom there. I expected they'd swap her out, but I guess not. You can see the solenoids up there on top of the heater box. One's solenoid for small amounts and the other one opens it up wide to the big jet. I put a filter on the line coming in, and the pump is actually under the NOCO charger there. I don't know if you can see it underneath there, but the fittings are there. It is about the only spot I could fit it under the hood. I've been running a bigger air filter and it seems to make a big difference as well. Breathes quite nicely. If you guys ever get a chance, Milwaukee makes a nice under hood light. I'll go into detail further on with that probably. Got the gauges up and in. You can see the snow controller there, and did a bunch of wiring. Put another couple of fuse blocks underneath by the steering wheel in preparation for the gauges and switches. You can see a little more as I go, and got a bunch of stuff going on here anyway. I'm ham radio operator as well, so I cut a speaker in for the radio. Radio's mounted under the seat, so I figured it'd be nice to have the speaker where you can actually hear it. Up with the gauges up by the windshield, and had to put make a bracket to mount the head for it on there. You can see it in these other pictures here. It's a nice little setup that way. And then I ended up getting a bunch of stainless tube off Amazon, and I really don't know, in these pictures it looks good, but I really don't know the quality of the stainless that I ended up with there. I used stainless wire when I migged it up there, and it seems to be rusting all over the place, not just on the welds, the tubing itself. But it was cheap, and well, you get what you pay for, I guess. You can see on these pictures here, we tacked it up, cut it in pieces, and put it together there. Test fit everything, brought it back off the truck and did the full welds with it, and flap sanded them down, put them back in. Probably end up powder coating those later on here, like I say, due to the rust. You can see the snow kit plumbed back in on it there, and the way everything sort of clearanced in the hood there, it's about the only way I could fit everything to make it work. Back when I was talking about that Milwaukee under hood light, this picture here shows it. You can see the light coming off it with it on, and makes it a godsend for working on those vehicles like that. Sometimes I even clip the tabs around and I'll put them on the roof with the doors open and use it inside for light up out of the way on the interior there. And I ended up getting the unistrut, aluminum unistrut, and making a mount in the truck box for running my 10-gallon water meth tank in the back there. I put a ball valve on it, so if I ever need to pull that tank, it comes out easy. And once it was mounted, I figured I better protect it, because it's up in Canada and we do get very cold temperatures, and it's just a plastic tank, and I do haul stuff in these trucks. They're not just driveway candy. So tacked a box up for it, went through and buffed it all up, and ended up, I like putting trailer plugs in the box so you don't have that trailer cord running all over there. So I put a RV plug and a 7-pin big truck style. I usually use the big truck style plugs on just about everything. They seem to be much more reliable than the RV style. And So once I got some power on in the truck there, I powered up some of the switches and circuits, and you can tell their lights are a little too bright in the switches there. So I ended up taking some resistors and making a voltage divider to try to dim them down. I dropped it down to around 3 volts, and it helps a lot, but you can still tell that they're pretty bright, especially at night. It seems to wash out. You can see other pieces and parts in the cab there, the switches and USB power, and how it's all coming together. Wired in switch for battery charger and block heater, or I switch it the other way and it's just a battery charger. Seats in there, got some aluminum kick plates, and started working on the bumper. So the bumper I had with this truck was pretty banged up, beat, rusty, falling apart. I had a bunch of scrap floating around here. I built this one pretty much out of scrap. I wanted a winch bumper, something good, solid, and somewhat heavy duty without weighing the whole front end down like a lot of the bumpers I've built in the past. So I used some C-channel on the very front there, and a bunch of 10 gauge, 12 gauge for other parts and pieces of the bumper, and made it contour the cab the best I could with what I had. I got it all buffed up, tacked up there, and once it was all pretty much assembled, I decided to weld it all up in one kick at the cat and get that all buffed up. Put a light bar on top there. Still needed some ventilation in for the intercooler, so I had some spots left for that, and seemed like it's turned out pretty good. I've had a bunch of people express some interest in it. And while I was welding, I swapped over my airbags from another truck I had. Actually, those bags have been on 3 different vehicles, I'm sure, because they were used when I got it, and this is the second truck I've put them on. So I made some shackle lugs up for that bumper, and they're at a 1-inch flat bar, 1x4, and it was a bugger to drill through it with the drill press, and put them on right where the frame attaches to the bumper, which be as solid as anything on there. That C-channel is pretty tough stuff. And cleaned her all up, and you can see the pipe on there. That's where I mounted the solenoid pack for the winch, and then shot it. This time I made sure to use Raptor liner on it and tinted it to the color match. It turned out quite nicely. Put a cord end on it for plugging in. That's what the hole was for. And test fit the tires so I could figure out mud flaps and size for everything there on the truck. I was waiting for the bumper to dry. Got the light bar mounted on it, and a flare lead. Went back to working on the checker plate for the mud flaps. So I went out and had a bunch of 1/8-inch checker plate aluminum bent up for some running boards. There's nothing available around for this year truck that I could get reasonably priced, so decided to make my own on it, and it turned out quite nicely. As you can tell from the pictures, I don't have the running boards finished, but I wanted to take it around. I got the tires put on my old rims there, rims are put on the truck, and happy to test it out. I had a miss on it though, on the injectors. Couldn't figure out for the longest time what it was, but you can tell in this picture here that the wires are backwards. Somebody changed the end for the valve cover harness for the injectors, and the yellow and orange are switched around. The one that was on there with the heat shrink was spliced color to color, but the colors were in the wrong spot. It was kind of interesting to troubleshoot that one, because you'd pull the wire off the one injector and nothing had changed. You'd pull the wire off another injector beside it, because it was 2 to the jump or 2 to the pigtail, and neither one had changed the engine, but it was pouring unburnt fuel through it, and the pyro on the one side was about 150 degrees less than the pyro on the other side. And no sooner I get the truck done, I drove it around for a little bit and took a trip down to the States. I had about 200k on this windshield here, where I smoked an owl at 2 o'clock in the morning. I actually drove it more broken and had it changed in Montana after I crossed the border than I did with the glass new in one piece. And somebody tried to break into my truck, and not too impressed with that. I ended up shaving the lock on the driver's side because they pounded it in like the new Super Duties, and just didn't really feel like repairing it. So I'm gonna shave the locks, and when they break in the other side, I'll do the same with it. That's just a little bit of the wife's vinyl from her vinyl cutter there until I can get her sanded down and painted up proper. Thanks for watching, and to see more of this actually done in a video now that I decided to start videoing it, please remember to like and subscribe and see what all I'm working on.